there's always this tension that exists between privacy and security. But we don't necessarily need to pull the tension too far in one direction.
30 days was really just too less. I think it should have been at least 60 or 90 days in jail.
I don't think it was unfair, or, I mean, he got punished.
This is the right thing to do, period.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday evening, June 19th. A lot to cover this hour, but up first, we talk about stop and frisk. We're going to hear from a retired NYPD captain, somebody from the inside who's now an outspoken critic on the policy. And we'll also get into Ravi's release. After serving only 20 days of his 30-day sentence, the former Rutgers student who was found guilty of using a webcam to spy on his roommate, well, Darun Ravi is a free man tonight. The question is, and we'll get into it, was justice served? And later, decriminalization? Well, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, his proposal to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana in public view appears now to be dead on arrival. We thought this was a done deal. Not so fast. We will explain. And then, taking charge. President Obama, last week, he issued an executive order that fundamentally changed our immigration policy, all to talk about the DREAM Act. Well, tonight we're asking, what if he did that for a host of other issues? Not only would he get away with it, but would the American public like him or not like him more for it? It's all coming up on this edition of RFL, but let's begin with stop and frisk. Certainly an issue we've been covering for well over a week now on this program, and some may say, why so much attention? Well, I'll tell you why. I'm a fan of New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, as well as the Police Commissioner Ray Kelly. I think they typically have not only the right idea at heart, but the right policies to go with it. But in this instance, I think they're dead wrong. They're pushing what I believe is to be an impossible policy driven by numbers, now so more than reason. And it's a policy that, if you think about it, it's almost impossible to implement without employing racial profiling. You're in some neighborhoods, not others. You're meeting quotas. And as more people who have been stopped and frisked share their stories, and more police officers are speaking out about the pressures they're under to meet those quotas, the momentum against the policy has been building. And if you want any evidence of it, look at Sunday's silent march against stop and frisk. Well, we're going to get into tonight not just the numbers of it, but also the reason or lack thereof behind this. Now, the person who's been at the forefront of our coverage on this is Kim Langel. She was there, in fact, on Sunday, and she's in first position now with the fallout. Kim?
In the days since thousands of marchers in Manhattan protested the NYPD's stop and frisk policy, supporters of that policy have begun to wonder if the program should be fixed. According to a published data, 87% of the stops last year were blacks and Latinos. Now, while Reverend Al Sharpton delivered a sermon at a congregation in Harlem on Sunday, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg took the pulpit in Brooklyn, telling a predominantly black congregation that stop and frisk should be, quote, mended. Sunday's silent march down Fifth Avenue, led by Reverend Al Sharpton, was meant to send the message that discontent with the city's stop and frisk program is spreading beyond the communities it targets. Protesters said problems with stop and frisk won't be fixed by a visit to a church.
We understand that there are issues in our nation regarding terroristic activities, but there's always this tension that exists between privacy and security. And so right now, we understand the need for security, but we don't necessarily need to pull the tension too far in one direction, which is what has happened under this police commissioner.
Last year, the NYPD stopped New Yorkers more than 685,000 times. 87% of those stopped were black or Latino. Compare that to data from 2002, which shows about 97,000 stops. In both years and all the years in between, more than 80% of the people stopped were found to be totally innocent. NYPD patrol officer turned whistleblower Adil Polanco says he knows firsthand what it's like to patrol a beat and feel pressure to stop people.
I grew up in the Heights. I grew up in the hood. I know what it's like when it's 90 degrees and you live on a fifth floor and it's hot. And you walk downstairs and you sit in a stool or sit in a car trying to cool off, and then the officer is going to give you come and give you a summons for blocking pedestrian traffic.
The NYPD has always denied that they maintain quotas, but Adil Polanco testified in court that he captured these recordings during roll call inside the 41st Police Precinct in the Bronx.
I want 250 to see something. I want a ghost town. I want to be able to echo from one end of the street to the other. You understand? That's what I want in a perfect world. So that's your mission. Guys need college, need activity, there you go. So you gotta get me moved.
And if you think 1 in 20 is breaking your up, guess what you're gonna be doing? You're gonna do a lot more than what you think.
The recordings establish Polanco's and at least 4 other officers' claims that NYPD supervisors set specific quotas for summons and arrests, like stop and frisk. It's what's referred to as 250s and C summons, and also that NYPD management agreed on a quota of 1 arrest and 20 summons per month per officer. During the 10 years of the Bloomberg administration, police have performed over 4 million stops of black males between the ages of 14 and 24. The number of stops last year was greater than their total population in New York City, meaning that if you're a part of this demographic, odds are you were stopped more than once just this past year. Rich.
Well, thank you very much, Kim. And joining us now is John Eterno, a retired NYPD captain and chair of the Criminal Justice Department at Malloy College. And he spent years teaching at the Police Academy and training officers on stop and frisk. He's been an outspoken critic recently of the policy, specifically the focus on the numbers. And he recently penned a piece, Policing by Numbers, which appeared in the New York Times editorial pages. He's also the co-author of The Crime Numbers Game, Management by Manipulation. John, thank you very much for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Hi, Rich.
John, obviously you taught at the academy officers about the policy, and I've heard people say it's not the policy that's the problem, it's the quotas. Can you have one without the other? Can you have stop and frisk and put discretion in the hands of cops, or is it a problem waiting to happen overall?
Well, first of all, these quotas are very dangerous, and in fact, they are illegal. There is a state law against quotas. Police officers cannot and should not be under this type of pressure to write stop and frisk report. The basis for a stop and frisk is reasonable suspicion. That is a level of proof that an officer must have. Without that proof, an officer does not have the legal authority to make a stop. So officers may be forced through these quotas by doing illegal things. And I think, unfortunately, it's gotten to the point, especially in minority communities, where the police department has become an army of occupation. And this clearly is not what is called for and not democratic policing.
You know, John, we just heard in Kim's setup a recording of a police captain who was telling his guys, you got to make your numbers here, I want a ghost town out there. Is this an aberration? Is just this one rogue captain here who's talking tough in front of, the cops? Or is this systemic? And if it is, explain for the audience what it's like if you're a cop going out on patrol and you got to make your quota.
Unfortunately, it is systemic. This is something that is throughout the city of New York. Officers are being forced to meet these quotas. In fact, the PBA has put out an advertisement indicating that the officers are under this pressure, and not to blame the cop for what's going on, but to blame the management for that. So clearly these pressures are just enormous on officers, and it is throughout the city, and my research has indicated that it is completely 100% in every precinct, every transit district, and in every police housing service area.
We spoke to Peter Vallone, who's one of the few members of the city council who says stop and frisk may be imperfect, but it works here. And when I pushed him on some of the trade-offs that you articulated, he said it's worth it. Take a listen to what Councilman Vallone, a Democrat from New York, had to say about the policy and why it ought to be kept. As long as we're being upfront.
If you live in a high-crime neighborhood, you're going to ask for more cops, and then when they show up, they do their job, which is based on reasonable suspicion, make stops.
As long as you're willing to say, as long as you're willing to say up front, hey, if you live in a rough neighborhood, you should expect to be stopped and frisked, rather than if you're living on Park Avenue or Astoria. As long as we're saying that comes with the territory by living there.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. As long as you're willing to say, if you don't get stopped and frisked, you will lose more lives, that's completely consistent.
He's absolutely wrong. First of all, this is not saving lives in any way, shape, or form, but this is ruining lives. What we're doing is we're labeling these youth. We're giving them, and it's mostly youth, minority youth, we're giving them records. We're giving them enormous amounts of summonses for activities that are being done in white neighborhoods as well. Not too many years ago, in 2002, there were less than 100,000 stops, and we had approximately a little bit less than 600 homicides. The same is the case today. We now have 700,000 stops, though, and we still only have less than 600 homicides. So this is a policy that's not working. Let me repeat that. This is a policy that is not working. It's not saving lives. It's not helping people. It's ruining lives. And I want to make this very clear. I am not against stop and frisk. What I am against is its abuse. And it is clearly being abused in these minority neighborhoods, particularly when minority youth are being singled out for doing behaviors that white youth in middle-class areas are doing as well.
If they got rid of the quotas, would more people be dead in New York City as a result of violent crime?
No. These quotas are things that officers abhor. We're not going to have a Wild West show if police officers don't give 700,000 stop and frisks in the city. It's not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to help these minority neighborhoods and these minority youth to grow up and to respect police officers rather than hate them.
John Eterno, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome, Rich.